The outlook for 2025 in logistics, what supply chain leaders want under the new administration, and quality and safety on the job. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by CSCMP Edge 2025. New year, new you. It's time to level up at CSCMP's Edge 2025 Supply Chain Conference. Mark your calendar for October 5th through 8th at the Gaylord National in Washington to join supply chain's best to gain cutting-edge insights and elevate your career. As a Logistics Matters listener, save $500 on registration with code LOGISTICS. Start your year strong and secure your spot at Edge 2025. Go to cscmpedge.org to learn more. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, 2025 is just 2 weeks old and most of us have barely settled into the new year yet. But as we consider the economic outlook, politics, and ongoing turmoil around the world, it could be another very interesting and possibly volatile year for supply chains. To discuss this and more, here's Victoria with today's guest. Victoria?
Thanks, Dave. Today's guest is Zac Rogers, Associate Professor of Supply Chain Management at Colorado State University. Zac is also an analyst for the monthly Logistics Managers Index, or LMI, and he's here to talk with us about the health of the logistics economy as we begin 2025. Welcome, Zac.
Hi, thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you as well. Thanks for joining us. Just to get started, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Logistics Managers Index, can you give a brief overview of the monthly report? What is it and what does it measure?
The Logistics Managers Index, or LMI, is a change index based on surveys from, between 100 and 200 folks who are director level and above that we take every month. So these are people who are in the logistics and supply chain industry. And we ask them about 8 key metrics: inventory levels and costs, warehousing capacity, utilization, and prices, transportation capacity, utilization, and prices. So we ask them about those 8 metrics and we say, are they going up? Are they staying the same? Are they going down? So is transportation getting cheaper, more expensive, or is it staying about the same? We average all those responses together and we come up with the diffusion index. And the way to read a diffusion index is any number above 50 means expansion. Further above 50, greater the expansion. Below 50 means contraction. The further below 50, the greater the rate of contraction. So we're measuring sort of the speed of change with this index. And it's been pretty helpful for predicting movements in the overall economy. That's the idea behind this is if something's going to get sold to a consumer in February, it was probably on a truck or sitting in a warehouse in January.
Great, thank you. So, given that, how would you assess the health of the logistics economy as we start a new year, as we sit here right now?
This is the most normal new year in the 2020s that we've had, which I know it's not maybe saying a lot, but this is the most normal supply chains have looked. And there's a couple things that are really key here, especially from this month's report. The first is that our December reading for inventory was 50.0. That means, basically we broke even on inventory. And if you look at, retailers versus wholesalers, manufacturers, retailers came in at 33. That tells you that retailers actually sold a lot of inventory during December. And we saw, reports during December of good consumer spending and things like that. So that's positive. Because they sold a lot of inventory, now we're seeing things being pulled forward. If you look at all the port metrics, they were up all through the second half of December and early January. And the good thing about inventory being pulled forward and also just, then going out to the customer is it means we're utilizing both warehousing and transportation. The transportation market, as I'm sure most people listening to this will know, we had a freight recession basically from the middle of 2022 until 2024 sometime. And this month, if we look at our transportation metrics, transportation prices came in at 66.8. That's the fastest rate of growth since April of 2022, right after the invasion of Ukraine happens and inflation goes crazy. Transportation capacity is at 53.2. And here's why that's great. So, two things. One, there's a 13 and a half point spread between those numbers, the highest we've seen in 2.5 years. Secondly, we haven't seen, despite price growth, we haven't seen capacity dip way into the negative territory. And what that means is we're having growth, but it's slow, sustainable growth that we're able to absorb. Now, maybe carriers would like it if demand was way higher than supply, they could charge higher prices. But in terms of sort of a holistic growth and sustainable growth for the industry, that's actually really, really good. For warehousing, I would expect that warehouses are going to get a little fuller this year than they were in 2024. 2024 was really all about just-in-time inventory and running things down. Now, going into 2025, there's some uncertainty about trade regulations and things changing. So I would actually anticipate that 2025 will look a little bit more like maybe 2021 or 2022 did for warehousing folks. It won't be like 23 or 24, but we will see more inventory coming in. So to sum it up in one sentence, the logistics industry looks like it's in the best place it's been in at least 5 or 6 years.
Well, that's good news. And I was going to ask you about this sort of return to more typical growth patterns, after all that volatility we had following the pandemic years. What does that mean for warehousing and transportation? I know I'm asking you a bit of a crystal ball question, but what does that mean, sort of looking ahead?
Well, every month we ask our respondents, what do you think is going to happen? And across the board, they all think that a couple things. One, that prices are going to go up just in general for transportation and inventories and warehousing. If we look forward at our overall LMI predictions for our future folks, upstream thinks, and this would be retailers, that'd be wholesalers, manufacturers, is at 67.8, downstream's at 62.0. The all-time average for the index is 61.8. So both across the supply chain, basic respondents are saying that there will be growth kind of on the higher side of normal, still within normal parameters, but a little bit above average, basically. The thing that's really changed in the last couple months is that downstream folks are now predicting inventory level growth at 69.4. That gets back to what we said about warehousing a minute ago. We may be having a little bit of a departure from JIT because people are worried about tariffs. If suddenly everything's 10% more expensive, well, let's bring it forward now and we can deal with it later and pay the higher cost. You're sort of doing some back the envelope math that says, well, do we want to pay 10% more just to get it in the door or get a little more warehousing space? And right now, maybe a lot of folks are renegotiating warehousing contracts. Usually they're 3 years long. 2022 was probably the most expensive warehousing contract you were ever going to sign. So maybe you're hoping you can get a better rate in 25 and bring some of these things over. That 69.4 is a departure. I think in October, the last report we had before the election, downstream folks were anticipating a growth level of like 53. So we've gone from real JIT in 2024 to 2025 looking a little more JIC, just in case. And so, it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. And a lot of it is, guessing what might happen with an administration that hasn't even, started yet. But 2024 was a very normal year in terms of sort of just-in-time flows. 2025 could see a little bit more of the COVID era, let's build inventories up. The difference, though, I think, and this is a reason to be optimistic with 2025, is that even if we are building those inventories up, it won't be like 2022 where we had a ton of inventory and nobody was buying anything. Nothing looks like on the horizon that we can see looks like it's going to really slow the consumer down that much in 2025. So if the consumer stays strong, it doesn't matter quite so much that we're building up all this additional inventory because we'll still see things moving downstream. And I think that's reflected in the high predictions for increases for both transportation and warehousing prices, which are 77 for transportation and 75 for warehousing going forward.
Yeah, it's important to note. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there still, and global supply chain challenges persist as well. From the fear of port strikes to natural disasters and other issues, some of you've already mentioned. What do you see as the greatest supply chain challenges facing the industry right now?
Tariffs. And
Yeah.
the reason is because of the uncertainty around
Okay.
them.
Hmm.
There's some things we've had tariffs on forever. We've had tariffs on, heavy duty trucks for 60 years. That's fine. Because we know that they're there. Um, the problem is when we're moving things around, especially, if we have tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada are the three countries that have been mentioned the most, and those happen to be our three largest trade partners. If you look at the auto industry, components will come in, maybe raw materials will come in from China to Mexico, come up to the US, turn to components, go back to Mexico for final assembly, go back to the US for final sales. I mean, they could cross a border three or four times. And so if you don't know if it's going to suddenly be an extra 10% every time you cross the border, it makes it really difficult from a supply chain planning side to figure out, okay, well, how much are we going to order? How, where can we put our factories? And so really what I think supply chains want is just consistency. We want assurances because it's, a big investment to put a factory somewhere, to build a contract with somebody, to figure out transportation and supply. And so if suddenly you don't know how prices might change, that can be really difficult and make people hold back with making big investments. It's the same reason we didn't see any construction happening much the last couple of years because nobody was sure what the interest rates were going to be.
Right.
We're just now getting certainty with interest rates. It'd be a shame if suddenly we didn't have certainty with trade regulations.
Yeah. I want to ask you about labor as well. Challenges persist there throughout the industry. And
Mhm.
as an educator, what do you think the industry as a whole, companies, business associations, and educational institutions should be doing to prepare the next generation of logistics leadership?
Well, one thing I would say is that we keep adding jobs in the logistics industry. I mean, we keep needing more drivers. We definitely need more people working in fulfillment centers, distribution. We've become an incredibly, connected world and connected country, and that runs on people. You can talk about automation, and certainly that's the big issue at the ports right now. But it's unlikely that you'll be able to do a lot of this without people involved, especially at the distribution and fulfillment level. For educators, I think right now the big challenge is helping the students understand what the new tools might be. We just talked about uncertainty with tariffs. There's a lot of uncertainty with what jobs are going to look like in 20 or 30 years, because of the changing AI landscape. And so right now, I mean, to pull the curtain back, the real scramble at a lot of higher education is how do we incorporate AI? Because the answer isn't, well, chat GPT is not allowed. It's the answer has to be, how do you work with automation? It's not a robot, it's a cobot. It's your little coworker robot. And so I think right now the big challenge is, and partly, Victoria, we don't know what jobs are going to look like. And so what really you have to do is kind of the thing that we've always done in supply chain education, which is teach the students how to be resilient. Because as you know, supply chains change every single day. Every day, supply chains are different. I mean, I think I've been coming on and talking to you guys maybe for the last 5 years. Things are way different than they were 5 years ago. And, you can't really teach somebody what they're going to be doing in 5 years, but what you can teach them is how to be adaptable, how to gather the information they have, and then how to make the best possible decision. So, while the sort of ecosystem that new grads and supply chain labor exists in has certainly changed, the basic underlying principle, which is deal with the crisis and be resilient, that is still the same as it has been for decades.
Yeah, resilience and adaptability. Good advice. Thank you. Zach, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate your expertise.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy it.
We have been talking with Zac Rogers of Colorado State University. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Zach and Victoria. Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, of course, we have a transfer of power coming up in Washington with the inauguration happening on Monday. And you wrote this week about what some business groups are hoping to see under the new administration. Can you share the details?
Yeah, I'm glad to, Dave. And this sort of dovetails into some of what Zac Rogers was just talking about, which is getting accustomed to the unknown and to change. As you said, it's the middle of transition season for the new administration in Washington, D.C. We saw the 119th Congress begin their season back on January 3rd. And then, of course, Monday, just a few days from now, will be the inauguration for Donald Trump's second term. There are a whole lot of unknowns in this time of change. But one thing that's definitely true is that business interests are busy lobbying all those politicians to try to promote their interests. And we did see some details this week that shows what policies that some supply chain interest groups might want. This was news from the American Association of Port Authorities, which released their 8-point sort of wish list or their recommended policy agenda to support the nation's seaports. One of those items that caught my eye right off the bat, and again, reminds me of what we were just talking about with Zach, was tariffs. And the Port Authority group is opposed to most of the steep new tariffs that Trump has been supporting. Those tariffs hadn't happened yet, of course, but we've done a fair amount of reporting on the idea, and generally we've seen some pretty broad-based opposition to the idea from the U.S. business community. And, from port operators' point of view, of course, tariffs on foreign goods would, raise the cost of goods and therefore decrease imports. And that's bad news for ports in terms of handling containers. And other business groups likewise have pointed out a little more broadly that since tariffs increase those costs for either retail sales or for manufacturing, they tend to raise prices for consumers, and then that can raise the price of money and cause inflation. So those are the sort of ideas behind that.
Right, Ben. Well, it's understandable, and you can see why most businesses don't really support the tariffs. But what other policies did the group say they do want?
Right. So, and as I said, this was an 8-point plan, so there's 7 more there. To run through them, the American Association of Port Authorities was supporting reauthorizing, or that means refunding, the infrastructure grant programs. They want to ensure, again, more funding for navigation channels. These things make a lot of sense for building the ports, of course. They're pushing back on what they call burdensome federal permitting. They're also pushing back on vessel speed restrictions. Some of those try to require ships to move more slowly through areas where whales might migrate, for example. The ports also want to empower ports to have what they call an all of the above energy strategy, which means not just electric, not just relying on fossil, but a combination that works. There are 2 more. They want to, of course, secure the ports from potential threats. And then also expedite the Build America, Buy America waivers to incentivize domestic manufacturing of ship-to-shore cranes. That's one of those things that's a kind of a big deal that they're solely or nearly all made in China right now, and there are concerns about foreign influence over that technology. But at the same time, it's hard to start up an entire industry to build because those cranes, and as you know, are massive there. And that the Port Authority folks, they're already working hard to support those 8 goals. They've been meeting already with members of Congress and with industry, and then as well, AAPA's president, Kerry Davis, has met with the Trump transition team, as well as with U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary nominee Sean Duffy's staff. So it's a busy time to be in Washington, D.C., and it'll be really interesting to see some of these issues in the new year.
Right, and we will have to see how it all plays out. Of course, we'll be here to report on it.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
And Victoria, you wrote a story about how many supply chain workers are raising new concerns about the quality of what they produce and also their own safety on the job. Can you share more?
Yeah, happy to, Dave. So, as you say, manufacturing and logistics workers are raising a red flag over workplace quality issues. And this is according to some industry research that was released this week. And it all comes back to internal and external pressures that are causing workers to cut corners, therefore risking both safety and compliance demands. So, this was a comparative study of more than 4,000 workers from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, and it found that manufacturing and logistics workers in particular say they have seen their colleagues reduce the quality of their work and not follow processes in the workplace over the past year, with rates exceeding the overall average of those surveyed by 11% and 8%, respectively. The study, which is called the Resilience Nation Report, was commissioned by UK-based regulatory and compliance software company IdeaGen, and it polled workers in industries like energy, aviation, healthcare, and financial services.
Victoria, I can see that there is a lot of stress in the workplace for sure, but what are the specific pressures that are facing manufacturing and logistics workers?
Yeah, so internally, these workers say they're under pressure to deliver more despite reduced capacity. And we write about that all the time, of course. It can be a real challenge finding and keeping good workers in warehousing and transportation, an issue that's exacerbated, by rising order volumes and delivery demands. Among the external pressures, respondents cited the rising cost of living as the biggest problem, closely followed by inflation rates, supply chain challenges, and energy prices. And to put some numbers to it, according to the study, 41% of workers said they'd witnessed their peers hiding mistakes, and 45% said they've observed workers cutting corners due to apathy, and that was 9% above the average. The results also showed that workers are seeing colleagues take safety risks. More than a third said they've seen people putting themselves in physical danger on the job. The good news, and there is some good news, is that most of the respondents agree that emerging technologies and AI, artificial intelligence, will help alleviate some of these pressures at work, but they've yet to experience those benefits.
Well, hopefully those technologies will help to promote both quality and safety so that all employees can feel a little bit more secure about doing their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully things get better.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Zac Rogers of Colorado State University for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder that Logistics Matters is sponsored by CSCMP Edge 2025. New year, new you. It's time to level up at CSCMP's Edge 2025 Supply Chain Conference. Mark your calendar for October 5th through 8th at the Gaylord National in Washington and join Supply Chain's Best to gain cutting-edge insights and elevate your career. As a Logistics Matters listener, save $500 on registration with code LOGISTICS. Start your year strong and secure your spot at Edge 2025. Go to cscmpedge.org to learn more. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.